But the thing is that I also have, it's not something I'm apologizing for. You
No.
know, it's who I am. It's part of who I am. And in order for me and for us to have a healthy relationship, it needs to be on the table. And it's not something that you should be afraid. And I know this is so much easier said than done, but it's not something you should be afraid to admit that this is like something that, you know, could end a relationship. This is part of who you are. And if they can't accept that, right, then that's something that you need to revisit. Now, in terms of how he may be feeling, I think that there has to be this open line of communication where you're able to converse about it and learn how to talk about it.
Welcome back. We are on today with my guest, Jordan from Listen Lucy, who is back on the show for a second time on the Too Old for This Shit podcast. I'm your host, Angie Sorensen, and you can find me at angies.com. That's Angie-s.com. Or on my Linktree, which is Linktree/Too Old for This Shit, spelled SHIT, no asterisks for that one. Those are the places to go if you want to be part of my community, get involved with what I do, and have a direct access to me. So I'm really excited to announce that my beta workshop, where I help technophobes create and release their first podcast within 6 weeks and on a budget, is starting this week. Now, if it's something that you're interested to do now or in the future, please get in touch and I'll see what I can do to get you on board as well. Now, if you haven't yet, why don't you just share this podcast with your friends? Why don't you rate, review, subscribe to it on Apple Podcasts, or follow it on Spotify, or for any of the other platforms that you listen from. Whichever way you show love is how you can support this show. And listen, the more you do that, the more it helps new listeners discover this show, because it starts to then go up and up and up in the ranks in the charts. It only takes 2 seconds for you to do, and it's free. And I'll be so super grateful and happy. And you know what? Why don't we do this? If you actually leave a review, you can send it to me on my social media, direct message me on my social media, or you can put it on your stories and tag me if it's a good review, though. If it's a good review. They say all publicity is good publicity. I'm not sure. Anyway, you can send it to me in a direct message in social media, or you can email it to me via my website. And when you do that, I'll reply with a voice message. I'll give you a little voice note. Why not? I think this could be fun. It'll be nice to have a little conversation going back and forth with all of you who listen. So today's episode is with the really, really lovely Jordan. And with Jordan today, we talk about how to not let our mental health get worse by covering it with shame and surrounding ourselves with unhelpful people. Now, this episode was recorded in November 2020, but I decided to still publish it, as having that conversation with Jordan really helped me. And so if this conversation can help any of you who are listening, then I'm all for sharing this with you. So without further ado, let's begin. Welcome back, Jordan.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be back.
Thank you. Well, I'm really, really excited that you said yes to come back. These are different times to last time. You came on, I think, early February 2020, which was episode number 27.
Yes.
Before pandemic, there was a few rumors. There was a bit of a virus going around. Was it a cold or flu? We didn't know. Then all of a sudden, boom, boom, exactly. It changed our lives, that little bugger. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. Like I said, I'm super excited to have you back on, because last time, one of the things we spoke about was how to not isolate ourselves when struggling with mental health. And now, obviously, we're being told to isolate. So I kind I want to talk to you about that. And also, for those who have not met you yet, and obviously you'll introduce yourself properly in a minute, but I just want to just reiterate, the part of the mission with your company, Listen Lucy, that I really enjoy, that I really love, is that your mission is to create a less judgmental and more accepting world with a focus on mental health. And I was really humbled by how open you are about your story. And so, that's something that's sort of stuck with me when it came to you. And so before we dive into how lockdowns and restrictions 2020 has put a twist on most people's well-being, even those who didn't feel like they probably had any struggle. I'm sure some stuff has come up. Yeah. Yeah, it has sort of put a twist on it. So please, before you go into it, please introduce yourself, where you live and what you do.
Absolutely. So thank you again, Angie, for having me. I'm so excited to be back. I'm so happy that you felt like I could, add some nice conversation around this very stressful topic. But my name is Jordan Corcoran. I am the creator and CEO of Listen Lucy, which is a mental health organization that uses real life lived experiences with mental health to break the stigma that surrounds it. Like you so beautifully put, our mission is to create a less judgmental, more accepting world. I live in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, in the United States. And, where you're going to learn a lot about me and what I think about all this in the upcoming podcast right now.
Yes. So, I went back to a previous interview, like my question sheet from last time, and there was some quotes in there.
Yes.
And I took those quotes again, and I sort of want to mention them now.
Okay.
Because obviously back then it meant something, but now some of it is probably even more relevant, because of the time. So I just wanted to say them, and then we're gonna, I don't know if you have some thought around them, and then we could go into the nitty-gritty of the interview. A quote from you, which is on your website, I got from your website, Listen Lucy, is called, "That's the thing with mental illness. As your life changes, so does the illness, and you have to adapt."
Wow. Is that not the truth?
Yeah. Do you remember writing that?
I do remember writing it. I have not revisited that quote since the pandemic has hit. But man, I really knew what I was talking about.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. I think sometimes what we write sometimes almost like preemptive or,
Yeah, foreshadowing.
Sure. Foreshadowing, that's the word, exact foreshadowing. And there's another one, which is from one of the articles that you wrote. And this quote is unknown. We don't know who wrote it. But it goes like this: "My anxiety tried to bury me. It didn't know I was a seed."
Yeah.
And I still love this. I still loved it. Because I think, a lot of us have had anxiety on some level or another. And especially this year for me, it's come back. And it really felt like it was going to bury me at times. And listen, girl, I'm still around. So
absolutely.
So that's, again, something. And then the last quote I wanted to bring up from your website, and that's one that you wrote also, is, so talking about mental illness, you said, "It doesn't make me a bad parent." And I love this, because I'm not a parent, but maybe one day I'll be a bonus mom. Who knows? There's still hope. But I think, I really love that, because I think, and I still stand by what I said last time, is that, I think that's very true, because it does add dimension. You have more empathy and stuff. And I think there is still a difference in the sense that, because, for example, you have a baby, you have a child. The difference that you're working on it and you're open to the conversation. So I think someone who lives with a person who has depression or anxiety or whatever it is that we have, within our mental health, and they're not talking about it or recognizing it or doing anything about it, living complete denial, it will be a very different story, right? Because it's very hard, because you feel so hopeless if you can't.
Yes.
If that person's not addressing it, the elephant in the room, yeah.
There's so much to say about so many of those, so many different things to say about those quotes. But I agree. I think that while it is and remains a fear of how I'm impacting my son because of simply who I am, I also understand that I have a better chance of creating a healthy environment around mental health, and that there is no taboo in my house around this subject, and that, this cycle can be broken because he can see how I handle not only mental illness and mental health, but adversity in general, and how we handle our obstacles. So my hope is that while I know at some times that there may be some negative impact that happens, I'm hoping that he learns so much more positive things from living in a household with a parent that has a mental illness. I hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, he will. At least he's not going to
Yeah.
be, he's going to understand that's part of reality.
Yes. Yes.
And again, it doesn't mean that he's going to be affected by it either.
Right.
They actually give him the tools to be like for resilience, going ahead.
Right.
So, okay. Because obviously talk about the elephant in the room, this has been, a big year for a lot of people work-wise and stuff. And I know for yourself as well, because you're an author, but you also, part of, I think, of your occupation, the big part of it was to go out and talk, holding events and being a speaker. So can you tell us a little bit, because obviously that has been cancelled really this year, like how, you told me a little bit about it. Like, can you just tell us like what has been your experience since the pandemic started? How has it affected you?
Yes. What the coronavirus has done to small businesses across the globe is devastating and wild. What it did to Listen Lucy specifically, I mean, to put it as bluntly as I can, it devastated my momentum, my business, the money I spent, the time that I've invested. I on the brink of when we actually spoke, Angie, the last time I had just launched a new branch of my business to create a speaker agency. I had finally gotten to this point where I had so much momentum. I was speaking constantly. I was about to embark on like the biggest financial gain for Listen Lucy, coming up on a conference that I had scheduled for Mental Health Awareness Month in May. The Tuesday before the United States shut down, I had done back-to-back assemblies at a high school and had this amazing day. And afterwards, I was out to lunch with my community relations manager, and we were, now looking back on it, we laugh, but we were like, what's all this coronavirus about?
Yeah.
And then Friday, people are making such a big deal about this.
Yeah.
And then that Friday, our country shut down, following suit of countries across the world that had already been shut down. And I lost everything. Come Monday morning, I had canceled contracts. I had canceled events.
Which basically means loss of money, right? When you say that.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is, Mm-hmm.
Which is devastating for any company.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Anybody, regardless of corporate office with thousands of people, but it hits a little different when you are an entrepreneur that has spent your life building this momentum. So it actually took me a very long time, like 6 months out of the past 8, to get out of the fog and the shock of kind of what happened and start to rebuild everything I lost. Because then on top of it, you're dealing with isolation and taking care of your mental health, and you have families that you have to take care of. I was dealing with this major loss, both professionally and personally, but having to keep my mental health in check and my household intact. So it was wild.
Yeah.
It was not enjoyable.
Yeah, this year has been a different beast, because it's like you lose your Sophia was your company. So I had a day job, I've mentioned this on the podcast before. I was made redundant. End of May, and there's been a few other things that's happened in my personal life. And so all of that sort of added different dimension to, it's not like before. So it's not like before where you can maybe somehow still go out with friends, like do the things to keep you up, but now you have to actually be alone in your house.
Yes.
Be locked in. And it adds this other dimension. And obviously I can't even imagine what it feels like, for you, like your whole legacy that you build. I'm not surprised it took you 6 months to get out of the fog, because it's heavy. It's heavy shit,
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, like, because obviously now you're on the other side of it, and I'm really happy to see that. Is there anything that you can share with us on how to walk through that fog and that shock state to come out the other way? Because, you've now you've pivoted, and, you've got a twist, you've done something out of it. There's something
Yes.
that came out of the mud, like the
Yes.
lotus that comes out of the mud.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a bit about that that journey and what you did and how it was for you?
Sure. So I actually, it's a very interesting time to be the person that I am and where I am in my mental health journey, because while this came out of left field and the rug was pulled out from underneath me and all the other cliches of just basically being clobbered out of nowhere, I know how to deal with crisis and struggle and adversity because I've been doing it for so long that it's in my makeup. So I know whenever a major change happens or whenever devastating news hits, I know my crisis plan, right? I know what I'm supposed to do in order to keep my mental health a priority. But I also understand that before anything else, my health has to be a priority. And that, in some cases, like takes over spending time with my son if that means that I need to go for a run, right? Because in order to be the best mom for him, I need to have my mental health in check. So there are times where that has to take priority over everything else. So for me, as soon as the lockdown happened, I started to put my crisis plan in place. I was meal planning because when I eat healthy, I feel physically better. I was making sure that I was sleeping correctly. I shower every single day. I think that's the most basic and easy coping technique, that you don't have to get dressed, you don't have to wash your hair, but shower every single day, brush your teeth every single day, work out when you can, get outside, even if it's for 10 or 15 minutes, even if it's cold, even if it's rainy, whatever you can do, break that habit, get that fresh air out of your system. I have an amazing breathing technique that helps me so much, that I've done so much my whole life, but specifically over the past 8 months, which is breathe in for 6 seconds, hold the breath for 8 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, and then repeat. I found ways to connect with my support system, even if I couldn't see them, whether that's FaceTime or texting or calling, talking things out verbally every day with my husband of how I'm feeling. And then also, I think a major thing is knowing when to take a break from it. If these coping techniques are not serving you that day, if a run is giving you more anxiety than resting well, then it's okay sometimes to take a break from that. But listen to yourself, trust yourself, but make sure that you have a plan of what to do to keep your mental health at the forefront.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I actually like what you said about with breathing technique, because I noticed when like there were times for me, I noticed for me, like being in the flat. So I live in a studio flat, which in the UK, what it means is basically is one big room with, like, you have the kitchen, living room, right? And then you have a separate bathroom. But so it's tiny. And at first, I used to be very smug when this whole lockdown happened. I was like, I'm on the winning team. I'm single. I live alone. Don't have to deal with anybody else's stress. And then 4 months in, I was like, I'm about to fucking lose it. I was like, I need to go out. I could not do the whole restrictions anymore, because literally, I think it's been very different for people who live alone, because it's literally been like, I'm either going out, meeting people, or I'm not going to make it through this year. It's literally, I think for people who live alone, it suddenly took a different thing. And I feel like, when you said about the breathing techniques, it's interesting because I could feel like at times, because, during the lockdown, basically, like there was certain things that wouldn't work anymore for me. So, for example, certain meditation or things like that. But then I found this meditation called, I think it's Vu meditation. And again, I haven't actually really practiced it, but I remember I did it the one time. I was like, oh, this is so good. And then I did it a few more times. And it's basically like a sound meditation. You do sound, and it basically is the vibration in your body. It helps you to stabilize your nervous system, I believe, I think. So, but things like that, and it's finding out what doesn't work, then just let it go and try and do something different,
I think that's so incredibly important to note, is that if it doesn't work, you have to continue to look for something. You can't lose that momentum or that ambition to find a coping technique that works. For years, I mean, I've preached it professionally. I've talked about writing and how writing has given me this gift and this ability to heal and talk through my emotions. When the shutdown happened and I lost everything and was trying to process it, I I couldn't write. My coping technique, it felt like it failed me, but like the quote you said at the beginning, as you change and as life advances, your mental illness or the situation changes and you have to adapt. So writing wasn't working for me. That was my go-to. But what I found in this case was that running was that meditation that I needed to feel what I actually felt and not have to talk about it. That's what I needed this time. And that's okay. You have to find what works for you, but you have to be the one that finds it. No one's going to do it for you.
So okay. So there's one thing that you said around, you talked to your husband about it. So I have a question around that because, so, because during the lockdown, personally, I guess I'm just going to say it. But I was made redundant. In that time, I also got to speak with my dad for the first time in my life ever at the age of 42.
Wow.
Again, a whole different story. It went well, and then it didn't go down so well. We're not in touch anymore.
Sorry.
I'm not part of his life, and that's just what it is. But, and then I also I met someone, fell for him, and then we broke up. So a lot of things happen. And so,
yeah, sure.
And I think one of the things that I realized, and I was saying about the flat not being healthy for me, because it's a small flat, and
right,
it's too much time on my own in the flat. And I think one of the things I found challenging was, and again, when it's new, when anything is when something is 6 months old, there's only so much of a foundation you've built with someone. But I found it difficult to, that's why I want to ask you, how do you, first of all, I didn't realize actually that I was spiraling down a little bit. I didn't notice. So it was sort of like having an impact on the relationship. I'd find just going to look for negative things all the time. I would be with him, I'd be fine. I'd go home within a day or two, bam, negative space. And then I realized it was I realized what was going on. I was basically starting to spiraling down, and it was just all this isolation and the lack of interaction, and it was just getting too much. And so I ended up actually going home for a month, and that helped. But basically, I had found it really difficult to, I feel like if you, I don't know how to open about things like that to the person that you are in an early relationship with. It's quite early days now with 2020. I think a lot of people who date are gonna come across those things a bit earlier on than they would maybe normally. Things are slightly different now. Things move faster, differently.
Yes.
And your gremlins come up to the surface much quicker. And I just found it, I think it's hard to, maybe because it's, I don't know if because he's a manager, but I know it was difficult for me to express in a way that he wouldn't feel powerless. I think I made him feel, I don't know what I made him feel, only he could say, but he's a good man and I've got nothing bad to say about him at all. But how do you convey how you're feeling without freaking the other person out?
Well, first, oh man, I think that, so in my situation, I think that we may have touched on this last time, but I have been with my husband for 15 years. So since we were, so he grew up with me and was with me from the very first step of this. So that doesn't mean it isn't hard. It really is. And it doesn't mean that I don't feel like a burden or a point of exhaustion for him. But I think too, the way that,
oh, so you do sometimes feel that too, like the burden.
Oh my God, of course.
Okay.
But I think, but the thing is that I also have, it's not something I'm apologizing for.
No.
It's who I am. It's part of who I am. And in order for me and for us to have a healthy relationship, it needs to be on the table. And it's not something that you should be afraid. And I know this is so much easier said than done, but it's not something you should be afraid to admit that this is something that, could end a relationship. This is part of who you are. And if they can't accept that, right, then that's something that you need to revisit. Now, in terms of how he may be feeling, I think that there has to be this open line of communication where you're able to converse about it and learn how to talk about it, right? Because I think now, I don't know if I can't answer for my husband, but I know him pretty well. He now knows, because we talk about it so often. I'm sure he doesn't want to talk about it as often as we do, but he knows, he can like notice triggers in me. He can notice when I'm starting to down spiral a little bit, and he either pulls back or brings, might bring it to my attention. So it's actually like I have this other person looking out for me.
When you say pulls back, what do you mean?
He senses when it's like not time to push a subject or push a conversation,
yes,
or
yes,
push,
yeah.
He pulls back, maybe
Gives you space.
Yes, exactly. He gives me the space that I need. And honestly, probably the space he needs. Like you said, we're in very close quarters right now.
Yeah.
Anyway, but just in our relationship as a whole, he always has, my husband is wonderful and clearly loves me unconditionally. So it doesn't mean that it hasn't brought many of challenges and obstacles into our relationship. It's not something that we both accepted easily. But it never was I've never viewed it as something that is like an embarrassment or a secret about me.
Yeah.
There are so many people dealing with these subjects. And by that, I mean like 25% of the United States is dealing with these subjects, and everybody has mental health. So everybody has felt anxious or depressed or a smidge of that at some point. So I think my hope is that conversations like the ones we're having are helping people realize it's not something, that's the stigma that's keeping you silent. That's the stigma that's teaching you shouldn't speak out about it. But I think it's fair to have those conversations.
Yeah, but you see, it's interesting because like I know that the way I handled it, like I think the thing is, I think like I know, how do I say it? Like I know where I went wrong. So for example, because I definitely have that thing of like I feel like I have that tendency of feeling like a burden. No, yes. I didn't feel like a burden to him. Like it's not like that, but
right.
I have that. That's my initial. Like I don't reach out.
Yeah.
I waited so long for one to recognize what was happening with me. I didn't. Like, I used to think I was so good at seeing the signs, but every so often it just creeps up and it's like, absolutely. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, it's gotten hold of me, shit. And so there is that. So I didn't see the sign. That was one. And I guess I'm sharing this because maybe other people have felt the same. And then at least, you're not alone. But it's like, and it's about taking ownership too. So that's what I want to say. Like, I want to take responsibility for what happened too. So I didn't see the sign until it got bad. And then it got bad, and I was like, oh, I can't. And I guess because it's still new. Like, I can't. I felt ashamed. I didn't want him to see me. So because I feel ashamed, I retract. That's my go-to. I pull away. So I retract. So that person goes, whoa, wait. We're like, they don't feel like you trust them with it, That's a breach of trust in a relationship when you pull away. It's like, so I pulled away, and then when he's there and he wants, he says no, like let me know. It all comes out, and it's like, verbal diarrhea. And
my God.
And then and then I decided to go home. So I was like, I cannot put this on him. He has a busy life. He has things going on, and I was like, I can't be putting this on him. I thought the responsible thing to do, and it was for me to actually go home to my mom, who's like in the middle of nowhere, countryside, like I needed.
Yes.
That's what I could feel. I was like, but I also realized in hindsight, I was running away from show that person I care about what he was dealing with effectively, because I also know that if this happens one, it can happen again, like you and I know. So it's that shame. And I think, I really wish that it wasn't something that we had to go around with. And I think that in a way, me pulling away, I think when you do that to someone, that person probably also think you don't want me there, you kind of leaving me. And then they kind of then go, maybe I'm not good for you and maybe I should go. So in effect, why am I saying this? It's like, it's a bit like you almost like manifesting your worst fear that people will leave you because you have mental health issue, when actually it isn't why they left. They left because of how you handled it too. And maybe they left because of your, not everyone wants to be around for it. But I think it's very important to say, it's a bit like saying, oh, that person left me because I'm overweight. No, they left you because of your behavior.
Right.
And it's a bit like with mental health. Yeah, sometimes it's too much and not everyone should take it on, which is why I think it's important to be responsible for it. But I think that sometimes we have to recognize that if we are ashamed from it, like I am, like we're ashamed and we pull away and we run away as our go-to because, oh my God, we're a burden and cannot be, putting that, then effectively I am pushing the other people away.
I can completely relate and understand. And I think that what's important is it's not something that you wake up one day and are like, oh, I'm confident in having mental illness. It's
Yeah.
a process, and you make mistakes along the way, and you figure out ways that this didn't work for me. This isn't how. Like for me, I know now, right? If I'm feeling anxious, I have to just. There is no like sweeping it under the rug for me. I have to say to my husband or to my family or whoever I need to say it to, whoever I'm with, I need to say as soon as they see me, I'm feeling anxious, because otherwise the entire interaction or the entire day is spent with me inside my own head, feeling like I'm trying to mask my anxiety or not let people in on knowing. But I found that if I say it, it like alleviates this pressure to keep it together. And usually it helps me keep it together. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
But it took me, I've been on this journey and in and out of therapy and actively checking in on my mental health for 15 years. So it's been a very long time that I've been able to start to have these conversations. It doesn't mean that every conversation goes well or that I don't make mistakes or I don't like fly off the handle or, use my anxiety to take out my frustration of my anxiety on someone I care about, because that absolutely happens. But I think it's this learning process, and then being able to come back after it and not bury our heads in the sand because we're embarrassed, but more so say, I'm learning how to communicate about this. This is the truth. I would like to be able to talk this through with you now that like cooler heads are prevailing, or now that I have a clearer vision or my mind feels a little bit better. I would like to talk through it now, because talking through the issue in mid panic attack or mid, depressive episode, I mean, that's never going to go well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like your coping techniques don't work in the middle of a crisis. It's like your way of life being a constant coping technique prevents you from being in a crisis.
So, but how do you, because obviously if you talk about it mid-crisis, like
Yeah.
mid-depression, mid-anxiety, what do you do though? If you mid-air, like, mid-crisis, and the person notices and says, hey, are you okay? What's happening? Talk to me. What do you do? What's your go-to line? Do you say, I just need a moment, just hold me? Or what do you say?
It's actually, I mean, this conversation couldn't happen at more perfect timing. I mean, it happened today with my husband when I came home. Um, and this ties in with the pandemic too. I go to one of my major coping techniques is working out, and I go to a spin class that I love very, very much. And the state of Pennsylvania just put a mandate on that you now have to, even if you're socially distant from each other, you have to wear a mask. So I had to spin for 45 minutes with a mask on today. And it basically simulated a panic attack the entire time. I had like a major breakdown in my car afterwards, and my sister was there, and I was trying to talk through it, and I was just a blubbering mess. And, I exploded. When I came home, my husband said, what's going on? And I said, I just can't talk about it right now, but I will. And because of our relationship and because of the way that we know how to like maneuver around each other during this, he knew what that meant. But I also knew to say, like, I can't talk right now, but like, it's not anything that you're doing. I just need a minute to process, and you have to have a partner that understands that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, but that's a good go-to line. I want to ask you a bit more about what is it you do now. I know I think like you've got like that PR company, is that right?
Yes, correct.
And I want to ask you before we go into that, like, why is it so important for you to spread this message of mental health and exposing, your truth like this, and talk about it so openly? Like, why is this so important to you to do what you do with Listen Lucy?
You know what's so interesting? I don't know if anyone's ever asked me that before. And I love it. I think that there are so many reasons why. I think like selfishly, it feels really good to create this purpose and this positive light in the world through something so shitty that I experienced and something really shitty that I live with. I think it keeps me in check in terms of making sure that I am practicing what I preach. I think that I have also had the opportunity to correct a wrong, or I'm working to correct a societal wrong that harmed me as a child. When I speak to middle schools and high schools and I see people in those seats that are going through the things I went through and know what I would have done to have someone on a stage speaking that language that I didn't even know I spoke, how much that could have positively impacted my life, and being having a privilege to connect with somebody like that and help them see that they aren't alone is something that I feel responsible for doing. I feel like almost like this is why I was put here, and I want to create. Now I have the other purpose. I mean, I guess this is now four different reasons why, but I have a child. I'm hoping to have more children, and I don't want them growing up in the atmosphere of being afraid of something being wrong with you and being judged for it and having to overcome it in silence. I don't want that to be the world in which they grow up. So I think that's a lot of different reasons why, but it's the truth.
Yeah, I love that. And also because and this is something that we talked about in when you first came on the show, like which is episode 27, I think it was called, like, is it a heart attack or a panic attack? I think it was
Yeah.
something like that. Right? And because one of the things that I think is very difficult, and I can understand the challenge, is for those who don't experience depression or panic attack, apart from some people just feel a bit blue, or they haven't yet felt, and again, I don't wish it on anyone per se, like, it's not what I mean, but
Oh,
like,
sure.
but if someone hasn't really experienced it or don't really know about it, it's very hard to know how to react. And I think it's definitely a language that we need to have on board, because I found that, there has been times where I've opened up or said things, and if after a few times it's either being completely shut down, dismissed, or the reaction is, not good or not what I sort of, I guess, like my expectations, those are my expectations, but then I will shut down. I'm not going to come back again. And I think it's a dangerous game, because you have to be able to talk about it. It doesn't have to be a train wreck. It doesn't have to be dramatic.
Sure.
Right? Because you have to also appreciate everyone has their own sensitivities of listening to this. But I feel that, things like, and I think we may have talked about this last time. I don't know now, but like, I used to see, was it a year or two ago, campaigns on social media about, suicide prevention. And they were saying how, they were basically talking to the person who was suicidal. That was obviously not a real person, but like, the language in the ad was like talking to the person as if you're the one who's like suicidal, going, you shouldn't be alone, you should reach out, all these things, like reach out, call. I'm like, well, that's the point. They don't. Like, but it's not they obviously they meant well with the ad, but I was just like,
of course, yes.
I was like, maybe that will work for some people, but for a lot of people it wouldn't. That's why people get lost in that, and they do the final exit. And so I think it's so important to understand signs. And I think one of the things is, like, if you find someone who you've been talking to is quite outgoing, or whatever their normal state is that all of a sudden you find they're distant. I mean, unless you've had a fight, people are not going to talk to you maybe straight away, but they say nothing really major's happened, but you find that all of a sudden becoming more sensitive, they're reacting quite heavily to what you say, or they're being distant. You find them rude. Usually people will find you rude, cold, like you don't care, aloof, all this kind of stuff. If that's something that's suddenly happening to someone who actually, when you knew them before, they weren't like that, it can be a telltale sign. Because I think it must be hard for people, because I think a lot of us it's easy to take things personally. You go, oh, that person doesn't care. Well, actually, you don't know. Maybe that person's actually at home hoping someone would knock on the door and check, hey, how you doing?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. There's an organization in Pittsburgh that I work with called Stand Together that does mental health trainings in high schools and middle schools around the area, and their 5 warning signs for someone that may be struggling as a outsider is, it's called WAP, which is W for withdraw, H showing hopelessness, A for agitation, P poor self-care, or the second P would be personality change. And those things, you may think that the person, like you were saying, seems like they're pulling back or withdrawing or becoming apathetic, but all those things can be warning signs that there is something bigger and deeper going on. And it's always better to check than to, we always say, like, prevention over tragedy. If you think that someone is struggling, it's always better to check than to regret it.
And can I just check with you, because I saw today, and I thank you for sharing those, because I think that's so true. Can you, or this they're important anyway, would you say that would be the same with that person who's doing the WAP thing, right? WHAP. Does it matter whether it's a man or a women? Like, you'd still have to go and reach out, right?
Yes. And I would say too that there's stigma, mental health stigma is so interesting, because there's like the generalized mental health stigma and like what the media portrays mental health to be. But then within each group, each gender, each religion, each age gap, there's all these specific stigma that surrounds that group, men or people of color, or different age groups, or whatever that may be. But those telltale signs really do speak to all different groups.
Yeah. And the reason why I'm asking you as well that question is because I saw literally before we went on, I went onto this Facebook group and was seeing this post. It's a Facebook group about like dating and stuff like that. People go in and ask for advice. And this woman was basically saying that she's been dating this guy for 2 years. And, basically there was so many telltale signs. Like, I could read it, because once you've been when you've been depressed, right, you recognize someone who's depressed. You're
like, I know where this story is.
Exactly. She was saying, here, the text he's sending me, blah, blah. What should I do? I don't want to be, smothering him, or be too needy, or be like, and I will see, and I stopped reading the responses after 3 folks that were pissing me off so badly. I was like, it doesn't matter if this guy, she's like, you don't know if he's really her boyfriend or not. I said, at the end of the day, this person is really struggling and he's spiraling down. And if you really care about him, I'd suggest that you actually go and reach out. Because like people were saying, and I'm bringing this up because that's actually the mentality around in this world, is that, he's a guy, you're a woman. And the women were going, no, if you're happy, you're less of a burden for him. And that's how, then he'll come back to you. He'll start to reach out. And I was just thinking, it's so besides the point. Like, who gives a shit about like dating etiquette in this scenario? Like, this
dating etiquette and like traditional gender roles. I mean, it sounds like these people were maybe posting from the 1950s. I mean,
yeah, and I guess there are things that are human behaviors we can't deny, and hormonal differences. But I was thinking, how can these were women, go, he's a man, don't do anything. I was like, why? I was like, this is probably against what everyone here is thinking. But I was like, I don't want to be dramatic, but I'm just saying, like, I don't wish grief on anyone. And like, do something, reach out. This guy is giving you so many signs. Help, like, cry for helps right now. So many cry for helps. I was so pissed off. I was like,
it's wild to me sometimes when we are as open as you and I are, Angie, and when I do what I do for a living, and and you do this podcast, like, you talk so often that you choose to surround yourself with people that aren't stigmatizing, that understand, or that are at least open-minded to hear what you have to say. And then every once in a while you just get like hit with a brick of somebody saying something that's so damaging and so stigmatizing, and you're reminded of just how much work there is left to do around this subject. And that is a perfect example.
Yeah, because the thing is, those women were coming from a point of view of, let's make sure he still wants to see you, or that you're not wasting your time with someone who's not that committed to you. And I was thinking, besides the point, like, the guy cares enough to let you know that he's on breaking point.
And
And
even if
and
he doesn't, yeah, and even if he is a stranger and is not somebody, I mean, he's still a human being regardless. If you see a
yeah,
stranger struggling, I would hope that you would invest and make sure that that person's
this is
okay. If you're
okay.
walking
Oh,
the
he
street.
wasn't. He's not a stranger. She knew.
But I just
I think it was like
mean,
a year and a half and two. Like that makes
yeah,
it so worse. I was like, how can you not even?
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, and like you said, even if it's a stranger, you should care.
Yes. And
Yeah,
if it's someone you know, of course you should check in no matter what your dating etiquette is. I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
yeah.
I agree with you on that. It seems like a strange response to someone being in crisis
I
is
know
what
it's
I'll
so
say.
strange. I know it's quite. I think sometimes we don't realize. And I think those obviously they didn't realize. They don't know that they are.
Right.
That,
Oh, absolutely.
that's how it's come across. But that's why. That's what you do is so important because actually it's not, it probably doesn't come from a bad place. People just don't know any better. And they're stuck with behind some rules that they thought is good for them. And people are working based on those premises. But actually, sometimes you've got to go past this and go, because I've made the mistake too sometimes of having bad behavior because I thought that was how was best for me and the
Right.
couple. But actually, it wasn't, and I knew inside something was off, but I was just like, let me just do this. And then I realized over time, I was like, oh my god, when you deal with someone, a human being who's genuine and good, you've got to be genuine, and you can't let your guard down and just be genuine yourself and be your good old self.
Of course.
So I think a lot of people just we get sidetracked by, I guess, the delusion of, I guess when you date for a long time, when you're single for many years, it's different from like, obviously, and I know you've had your partner for quite young. So, but if you go out there and you date all kinds of, you start to have different ideas of how you should act. You don't know what to do anymore. And I think sometimes it comes from that. And unfortunately, at this stage, like that those comments they were misplaced.
Yes. Yes. And I think you're right in pointing out that the intention typically isn't, well, I mean, not typically, but we hope the intention isn't bad, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think I'm giving people a little bit too much credit, but I think that you're right is that there's a difference between someone that is intentionally going out and being hateful or stigmatizing or just, awful. And then there's other people that are saying things because they're naive or ignorant to the situation that is a situation that I may have lived through. And then you can have, instead of like jumping down their throat or telling them how wrong they are, you can have a conversation and explain your perspective. And that's typically how progress is made over attacking someone and accusing them of being hateful. I mean, I really don't think that's the case a majority of time.
Yeah, we all do the best we can with what we know.
Yes.
And
Yes. Of course.
and I think that's usually what's going on. And I was actually I wanted to mention, especially because what we were talking about earlier, with the relationship, like the demise and whatever. Oh, I did wrong. I said, I've been reading, and maybe that is something that's relevant with what you do. I don't know. Have you read The Big Leap?
No, I have not.
Oh, okay. I highly recommend this book. It's by Gay Hendricks, I think.
Okay.
The Big Leap. And if anyone who listens knows him, give him a holler because I want to interview him. So
Okay.
it's called The Big Leap. And it's basically to do with your upper limits. So you know how, and I was just like, I realized as well, I know I was spiraling down, but part of what I was doing, and I think sometimes it can, sometimes it's hard to know what's going on. Is it this or is it depression? It's like your upper limit basically means that you only allow yourself a certain amount of love, abundance, and creativity or happiness. And so the minute you hit that ceiling of, oh my God, that's so much happiness. I've had happiness for like a whole weekend with whoever you were with. And then it's like, it's too much. You're going to look for an argument. You're going to look for something. Or for example, things are going really well in your couple, but then you're going to make a really bad investment and lose a lot of money.
Yeah.
It's like this upper limit. It's like a balance. You have to keep this equilibrium, which is actually keeping you small. I mean, that's something that maybe
Very interesting.
I'll put out in on the horizon here.
Yeah.
I think maybe part of it may be why this is just like a thought in process, work in progress, a draft really of what I'm about to say here. I haven't thought this through, but I was thinking maybe sometimes given that let's say if your health is all in check and your hormones are fine and nothing's playing around, you're not on specific medication stuff, like everything's in balance in your body health wise, but you somehow spiraling down, that maybe is also an upper limit sometimes, because if it comes back in cycle, you're like, I've been doing so well, everything's so good, and I'm so happy, and then all of a sudden you have to give yourself like a self-punishment almost. I wonder if there's sometimes something like that, because a lot of the thing in the book hit me quite, I was like, oof, yeah. Oof, oh yeah,
Absolutely. I think we all have a tendency to self-destruct, right? And to think that maybe we don't deserve it, or think that like life can't be like this, or I won't stay healthy, and that there are times that we're able to talk ourselves into a spiral. That's something that I have worried about for so much of my life, but specifically with what I do with Listen Lucy is that I'm talking professionally and live streaming my own battle. And that's something that I worry about too, is like keeping myself in check and making sure that I'm not reaffirming all of these things in a negative light. And that I'm not talking myself into this cyclical thing that I can't get out of, and putting myself in like self-destructing because I'm talking about it so much. I think that we all have to battle exactly what you're saying, and that we think we hit these limits or don't deserve it, or whatever. And then we'll unknowingly self-destruct.
Yeah. Yeah. And exactly. And I think there's so many, there's different, different things that help for different people at different times, like you were saying, through like the running or the writing. And like, for example, for me at the moment, I'm starting to listen to Eckhart Tolle again.
Oh, great.
Yeah, the author of Power of Now and stuff. And I'm like, because he's kind of funny in his, like, he's actually he makes me laugh. Like some of the talks he's like, he just makes me laugh. And I was like, oh, it brings me peace listening to him. Or Russell Brand, things like that. And I think people who've been through it, especially Russell Brand, is an ex-addict. He was an addict for a very long time. So the way he presents is, it's also like, it's a different way. And so I think there are ways to find like this. No, I think the main thing is to definitely not give in to the hopelessness, and just really not letting yourself being wrapped up in the dark, and just take one time at an hour. And if it means that you need to take something to calm you down, whatever it is, just do it, because you really have to make it till the next day. Like, it's simple, and you just got to like take it little by little.
And you deserve it, right? I mean, I think that's something that is not talked about enough, is that you deserve to be happy and healthy. And you have to keep that as you're like doing the work and putting in this time and energy and fighting, as bluntly as I can put it, fighting for your life, whether that's the quality of your life or you actually being here tomorrow. You deserve to be happy and healthy. And you have to keep that at the forefront of your mind, is that you don't deserve the negative thing that happens to you, but you have to work to get over it and to get through it and to endure and adapt to it. But yes, you're right. You have to stay, and you have to have the drive and the work ethic to put yourself first whenever you need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, a last bit, and then I want to know about your PR agency.
Take your time.
One of the things that that and I don't know if it's Byron Katie or if it was someone else, I cannot remember now. But one of the thing, let me just find it now. I'll find the formula. And I was like, and I actually had to read it today, because I was like, I was having a bit of a low day, and I was like, let me read this again.
Yeah.
So there's a formula here. So everything is happening for me, not to me, which I'm sure a lot of people have heard of this, but then you can extend it to this. Everything is happening to me, not to me. And I am thrilled this is happening to me because XYZ showed me what I want and need in this situation. And that I have the right to XYZ. And then you end with, I'm excited for what the future holds, and to finally, and then you sort of flip it, finally get XYZ. So let's say, I don't know. It could be so many things. And I don't want to, because that thing I wrote is like, it's so private, and I don't want to like expose it.
Oh yeah. No, you don't have to, don't share anything.
But I think it's like, it's one way to, and it kind of like makes you feel, oh, okay, yeah, that's what it's showing me.
Well, I think too, having those types of prompts, it helps you take a second and focus and almost meditate on the issue itself and work through it with prompts that are needed to flip the way that you're perceiving what's happening to you. You know, like it's not realistic to think that every single time an issue happens to you, you're like, I'm a glass half full type of person. So I'm
No.
so happy to have these struggles, right? But I think I think what's really important is that you do have moments where you can find the positive or find the purpose or, you know, or the message that is coming through or what you're creating, you know, like I personally don't like to give credit to anybody but myself for what I've done and endured. You know, I feel like I've created this, but I think that, and I've done this work, I've put in the years and the effort, but I feel like without this happening to me, not only would be a completely different person, but my life would be, you know, I've centered my career around this. I would be a completely different person with different goals and objectives. And I really like who I am and where I am. So that leaves me grateful that I had this experience, you
Oh
know? So
yeah, yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that now when I'm having a panic attack or when I've been hospitalized or what any of that, no, there's no gratitude around. I'm just pissed off and scared. But whenever you do have a moment to have some clarity, I think it's important for you, even if you're grateful for yourself for doing it and making it through. I think it's really important to have those moments. And that prompt is a perfect way to sit and focus on it for a bit. I think that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that you're making, yeah, you're making a good point. Yeah, you don't have to always be so grateful as well. Like I like everything that you just said. Could you tell us, because obviously, you know, you explained earlier that you've gone through this pandemic and, you know, all the stuff, like, you know, in your professional life, you know, got turned upside down and you came out of it. And I want you to share, because it's a good way of also seeing how you can change things around because you did it. So how did you go? So you went from like having all these events and speaking everywhere and actually starting to create an agency with other speakers to now having to pivot and flip it. And what are you doing now with Listen Lucy? You have a different
Okay. A different avenue. Yes.
that's it. I was looking for the word. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
different
no, you're
avenue.
fine.
Yeah.
No, you're fine. So in the middle of the pandemic, so years ago, I wrote Little Lucy, which is my children's book, but it never felt like the right time to put it out into the world. And then actually about a month or two before the pandemic, I was having lunch with my editor, Amanda Filippelli, who is incredible. And, I was having lunch with her and I said, I think it's time for me to like revisit Little Lucy. I'm starting to think about it constantly. And then the pandemic hit and we were shut down and I was left with my computer and that's basically it. And
Mm.
I got to work on Little Lucy and we wrote it and rewrote things and revised it and had the most amazing illustrator bring Little Lucy to life. And during that time I was pitching to the media to get coverage for my book. And I was so proud of the coverage I was able to secure to promote my book. And I was so proud of how well the book did for me through a pandemic when the media is taken over by not only negative news stories, but everything about coronavirus and the election in the United States. And that I was able to kind of like navigate my way. And I thought that there are definitely other organizations and small businesses like myself that don't have that ability or don't have those connections that I've made over the past 7 years. Also, my background is in communication and PR. So my education, I think I kind of took for granted that it would be like if my background was in accounting and I had also was able to do my accounting. I cannot do my accounting. Luckily, my dad can do the accounting for it. So I think I was taking for granted that I had this skill set that I wanted to help other people. So in October, I pivoted my business and started doing PR for mental health organizations, advocates, and activists, and starting to get them the much needed and deserved press that they need in order to scale the organization or have successful fundraisers or successful book launches. And it feels it feels like coming up for air for the first time. Not only do I get to continue to work under the Listen Lucy name, but I get to continue to bring these extraordinary people to light that are all having the same mission of ending the stigma around mental health and mental illness.
That's perfect. That's like you're raising everybody's boat, like,
Yes.
yeah. And you stay within still that the area you're passionate about, and you help people share their words. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
That's fantastic. I'd love to ask you the finishing thoughts that I ask all my guests. And
Yes.
I'd like to hear if there's anything different from last time, but
yes.
What would you tell your 18-year-old self? Oh, wait, you know what? Sorry. Because I think I had a feeling this isn't right, that question. I want to tell, what would you tell your early pandemic self when everything came crashing down in your business?
Oh, wow.
What would you tell her that you know now?
I would tell her to feel the loss that you've experienced and validate that, but to hang on and that you can endure this as well. And I think the biggest thing I would tell myself is that it is okay that you don't have it figured out right now. I think that's the thing I struggled with the most, is that as adversity has always hit me through different times of my life, I always was able to adapt and adjust quickly and think of a solution quickly. And I wasn't able to do that this time. And I think that actually prolonged it because I was being so hard on myself. So I think letting myself know that it's okay that this is taking time. You don't want to rush the solution. You want the solution to feel as good as the PR firm feels now. And that wouldn't have felt so good if it were rushed.
Yeah. I feel like this year's definitely been like going inwards and go, what do I want? Like, what's my alignment? Like, because I feel like we need to think long term now.
Yes.
What do you mean by to validate it, like to validate how you felt or the loss? Or
yeah, I think what was really hard and is still very hard is that because everybody's experiencing the pandemic, and everybody is struggling, but some people are struggling way worse. So you feel like, well, my family member is not in the hospital, or I haven't lost anybody, or we still have a roof over our head and food in our fridge, that you feel like I shouldn't be feeling what I'm feeling. But really, you are allowed to feel that loss and to understand that you don't have to lose everything in order to be devastated. In my own sense, I lost so much, and I experienced something that no one else around me in my circle experienced, the loss that I went through. And allowing myself to feel that way and not feeling bad, I think would be really beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I'm sorry I'm bringing this up because it's not like to chuff on that. But I think it's so,
no, it's fine.
But I want to give you some empathy because I do understand, because at the time, you didn't know that you'll be able to carry on the legacy the way you're doing now. But at the time, that was the legacy you were building. So of course, it wasn't just losing a business. A business is very personal, and your business was personal too. So it's a big deal. It's like a death. So right. So so you have to process that so you can let the new thing come out of the ashes, the sphinx out of the ashes. I'm all about these analogies today.
I love it. No,
I just send them mad. So it's I think it's absolutely. And can I ask you now today, now going through all of this, that I don't know if the answer has changed now for you. What stuff do you not put up with anymore?
I think, and I'm guessing this is what I said, but my brain is blanking, but I just read this quote yesterday that I shared on Listen Lucy's Instagram that said, you can forgive people and still not allow them access to you.
Yes.
And I think that has been such a big thing for me, is I don't allow people, whether they are in my inner circle or acquaintances or complete strangers, I don't allow that toxic energy into my life, and I don't allow anyone to make me feel like a burden or less than. And I think that that is something that I hope I instill in my child and my other children, if I'm able to have more. And I think that that's something that is so important to me because it protects my energy and it protects the work that I've done to get to where I am. I don't need outside sources being the reason that I stumble or fall.
When you say like, how do you describe like the toxic energy? How do you know it's a toxic energy?
How I feel when I'm about to see them and I am with them, the aftermath afterwards. My one of the things like through the years that I've learned is that a lot of times I feel like my anxiety is actually like, this sounds a little like hippy dippy, but it's the truth. I feel like it's giving me like a warning, like you're about to enter dangerous water, and my body is like letting me know. There have been people in my life or situations or atmospheres in my life that when I think about going to see them or going to an event or going to work or whatever whatever the situation may be, my body reacts to it. Right. And I think that instead of pushing that under and like forcing myself to be in a situation I don't want to be in, I think it's more important for me to listen to my body telling me like this situation isn't for you. So let's adjust the expectations and let's switch how we handle this because it's on me to protect myself.
Can I challenge that for a second?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
Because I understand how you feel. I understand what you mean by that.
Yeah.
Because I think that sometimes when we have, unless someone is like, being consciously malicious or just, being completely despicable is one thing. But for example, sometimes some people make you feel a certain way, right? You have like, don't know. But because I remember there was this time this is back in a long time. It was back in 2010, I think it was. I was working in a reception in this company, and the other receptionist, she was a senior receptionist, and it was we had such a power struggle because I was the new one, she'd been there for a long time, and we completely clashed. And it became so bad that I'd get really anxious going to work. And I remember one time I went home for the weekend and I started talking about it to my mom, and I couldn't really eat, and I was feeling a bit, wasn't feeling great. And then I ate just a toast, and it came right back out. And like I felt, she was like, "You need to address this because this is actually making you sick. Like you have to talk to her." And it was one of the situations where I was new at work, and her minions, like I would call it back then, they were being nasty to me. There was always like slight comments and stuff, and people in the company had a bet on how long I would last because they knew what she was.
That's nice.
I know, I found out this later on. Anyway, so one Monday morning, so after that weekend of being like so anxious, I became physically sick. Came into work, and I thought, I've got nothing to lose. I'm going to address this because I don't want to lose. I love my job. I really enjoyed that job, and there was I could progress in the company if I wanted to, that kind of stuff. So I was like, I'm not losing this job over that one person. So, and I want to address this because this has gone crazy. So basically, I came in on that Monday morning. The minute we had a bit of a break, I said to her, "Look, can we have a chat, you and I?" And basically, we had a chat. We listened to each other's point of views. I didn't say everything because obviously, you have to pick your battles, but we just expressed how we felt. And I remember I was listening to her complaints, about me. And I was like, you know what? I understand why. I can see now, if that's how it came across to you, I can see why you'd felt this way or why you'd say these things. And we both met each other in the middle. And guess what? We became close, so close.
That's great.
She became what I used to call my work auntie. And I even dreamt about her one night that she was family. And we're still in touch till this day. This is now going 10 years. This was a person that made me feel so anxious. I also made her feel a certain type of way. I can't remember how I made her feel, but she was just as wronged by me as I was wronged by her, if that makes sense, right?
Yes.
But we both owned up to our shit, and I think because we both went, you know what? I hear that. I'm sorry. we became super tight, and everyone was so shocked and was like, what, we're not hating Angela anymore? We're not. I was like, yeah, no. Like, we're not hating Leslie? Like, no. And we became super tight, and actually none of us were evil. We clashed, but we talked it through and we became so close. She was the first one I told when I was about to quit. I said, she was the first one I trusted. And you have to be careful in that company, because once you say you quit, you better quit, because
sure.
I trusted her, and I was like, you know what, I'm quitting. I've got a new job. And she was like, so proud of you, and so it was just like, so sometimes certain situations, people, they show a part of you that you may have disowned, or that you're not allowing yourself to have.
Well, I think too is that you're actually, while it is a challenge to what I was saying, it actually is kind of also supporting it, right? You listened to what you needed and what you're like. By saying that I don't allow that in my life anymore, I don't mean that I avoid it altogether. I mean that I don't allow that. If it takes for me to address it, then that's what I do. I don't allow someone to make me feel the way that you're describing, or for me to feel the way that you're describing. I think what you did is, it takes so much courage. But you also weren't going to allow that to take that opportunity away from you. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that I don't think nothing can be accomplished if we all just avoid people that don't have the same opinions and thoughts and beliefs and make us feel happy all the time. That's not reality, but I can't control those around me, but I can control like how I react to it. So whether it's something that I think is worth fighting for, like a job, like you were saying, then you attack that a different way. If it's someone that you are voluntarily spending your time with, then you attack that a different way. But either way, you cannot, or I shouldn't say you as an understood. I don't know if all of your listeners feel this way, but I no longer allow people to have that power to make me feel one way or another. I protect myself.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I mean, I think there's very few people I don't really cut out people easily, but there's one person, there's someone that I've spoken about, with friends before, like with friends who don't know her. And I've mentioned this example because she's someone who kept betraying me over and over again. Like, first was small things, and then it became quite huge. And, and I sat down every time to address it and talk. And then I realized this person had so much anger towards me, so much resentment. There was nothing. She'd built up this thing in her head of things that I had never done, never said. But I was a villain in her mind. There was nothing I could say to make her believe me. There was nothing I could do. Right. And she acted out of that way because she felt hurt. So she did things that were really hurtful. But I was like, I want to talk it out. And I'd actually forgiven her, even though she never apologized. But I've forgiven her. They don't always apologize. But like, I've forgiven her. But what I realized is that I forgive her. And I also decided I don't want that energy in my life anymore. Yeah. And I think there was a difference. There was a difference. It's like, I'm not a fool. I'm not going to go back and let her betray me again. We're good. Right. So I think, so there was definitely, you're right. There are discernment in that. For sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-mm. By the way, Jordan, this has been so wonderful. I want to say a big, big thank you to you.
I think this has been wonderful too. I love chatting with you. So thank you for having me.
It's been my pleasure to have you on. And can you please let us know where we can find you, how people can work with you? They may have something they want some PR for, your website, everything. Just give us your books, everything.
Yes. Okay. So everything can be found on my website, which is listenlucy.org. You can find all 3 copies of all 3 of my books. You can find the Listen Lucy PR information as well. The other place you can find me is on Facebook and Instagram. My handle is @ListenLucy, one word. And my email, if you want to reach out to me directly, is just jordan@listenlucy.org. And that's where you can find me. listenlucy.org, @listenlucy, or jordan@listenlucy.org.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Jordan.
You're so welcome. Thank you for scheduling this and asking me back, and we will chat soon.
Absolutely. Have a lovely rest of the day, Jordan. Thank you so much. Bye. And that's our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to rate, review, share it, subscribe it on iTunes, follow it on Spotify, or whichever platform you listen from. However you show love is how you can support this show. Drop me your questions or suggestions for future episodes via the website at angie-s.com or come and find me on Instagram at Tool for Dish It Podcast. See you next week, and until then,
using health inappropriately.